In the sun-scorched heart of the Texas plains, where the dust never settles and silence speaks louder than words, a girl barely of age stood clutching 3 children. Her stepmother's voice, sharp and final, announced the sale as if Clara were a goat or a pair of worn boots. 18 years old, mother of 3. No one bid, no one looked, until he did. Luke Granger wasn't the kind of man queuing up to rescue anyone. He was a widowed rancher, carved from wind and sun, with no room for dreams or second chances. But something in her eyes, or maybe the way the youngest clung to her, made his hand move before his mind caught up. 3 silver coins. What began as a transaction in a dusty crossroads soon unraveled into something neither of them expected, a battle for dignity, for trust, for love. This is the story of a man who didn't believe he could feel again, a girl who had forgotten how to hope, and the children who gave both a reason to stay. The midday sun beat down on the town of Dry Hollow with a fury that seemed almost personal. Dust spun in the air like whispers no one wanted to hear, clinging to every boot, every breath. The town square, normally quiet except for Sundays, buzzed with the tension of barter and bodies. Horses snorted, chickens flapped in their cages, children tugged at aprons. Men leaned on railings, spitting tobacco and measuring people the way they did cattle. Clara stood at the edge of the crowd, her hands trembling but firm as they gripped the shoulders of her youngest child. Gabby, only 4, didn't understand what was happening. Her brothers, Leo and Tomas, 6 and 8, were old enough to sense something wrong. Their eyes darted across unfamiliar faces, already used to expecting the worst. The stepmother, tall and sharp like a cracked whip, lifted her voice. 1 strong girl works like 2, comes with 3 young'uns, healthy, obedient. Laughter rippled from a corner. Someone muttered, "She got baggage." Another said, "Looks tired already." Clara kept her eyes low. She knew how this looked. A girl of 18 with 3 kids. What kind of story did that tell? A lie, mostly, but no one asked. She prayed they wouldn't. From behind the fence, Luke Granger watched. He hadn't meant to stop. He'd only come into town for nails and oil, maybe a can of beans. But the voice of the woman and the stillness of the girl had frozen him in place. There was something in Clara's stance, a kind of still courage, the way a deer stands right before it bolts. He didn't know why he walked forward. Maybe it was pity. Maybe it was madness. Maybe it was the way the littlest girl clung to Clara's skirt, eyes wide and full of unspoken things. "How much?" Luke's voice was low but carried. The crowd quieted. The stepmother turned. 3 silver pieces. "I'd take less for the girl, but the brats are hers too." Luke reached into his coat pocket, pulled out the coins. "You serious?" someone asked. Luke didn't answer, just dropped the coins into the woman's hand. She smirked. "Fool." Luke turned to Clara. "I got work. House needs keeping. Fence needs mending. Ain't got room for freeloaders. You understand?" Clara nodded. Her voice was barely a whisper. "Yes, sir." "Then come on." She gathered the children. No bags, no goodbyes, just dust and footsteps. They walked the trail in silence. Luke led the way on his horse, while Clara and the children followed on foot. It took hours to reach the ranch, a spread of land as weary and wide as the man who owned it. There was no gate, just open earth and the creak of an old windmill. Luke showed them to a side room near the barn. "It ain't much, but it's dry. Water's out back. There's flour and beans in the pantry." Clara nodded. "Thank you." He tipped his hat, then paused. "Don't call me sir, just Luke." She nodded again, lips tight. "Okay, Luke." And that was how it began. No warm welcome, no promises, just a girl with nothing, a man with less, and 3 children who would come to teach them both what it meant to build something where nothing had been. The side room smelled of cedar and old dirt. It had once been a storage shed for horse tack, but now it would be home. Clara didn't complain. She tucked her children onto a thin mattress spread across a hay pallet, using her shawl as a blanket. Outside, coyotes sang under a bruised moon. She didn't sleep. Luke rose early, before the rooster, before the light. He was already feeding the chickens when Clara emerged, her dress wrinkled, her braid messy but intact. The children remained asleep. "Water's cold," Luke said, not looking at her, "but clean." She nodded and filled a bucket, carrying it with careful arms to wash their faces. When she returned, the children had begun to stir. Tomas helped with the fire. Leo checked the cracked window pane. Gabby curled into Clara's lap. Breakfast was simple, flour pancakes fried in bacon grease. Luke didn't wait. He ate, nodded once, and vanished into the fields. By midday, Clara had scrubbed the porch, swept out the barn, and sorted a shelf of rusted tools. The children played quietly with a bundle of rope they pretended was a lasso. Sweat soaked her collar, and her hands stung from the broom. Luke returned near sunset, leading a horse with a busted hoof. Clara dropped her bucket to help. "Ever shoed one?" he asked. "No," she said. "You will now." He taught with gestures more than words. She listened, absorbing everything, the weight of the hoof, the rhythm of the rasp, the way the nails had to curve just right. By the time they finished, the sky was a wash of rose and ember. That night, Luke left a bar of soap on the step of the side room, wrapped in cloth, no note. The next day, she found gloves folded on the table. Bit by bit, her corner of the ranch became more than shelter. It became a space she cared for. She mended curtains, cleaned out a broken birdhouse, planted herb seeds in chipped teacups she found under the sink. The children noticed. So did Luke. One afternoon, Tomas fell from the fence. Clara ran across the field barefoot, scooping him up. Luke was already beside her, inspecting the bruised knee. "Boy's tough," he said. "I know," she replied. They stood there for a moment, quiet, unmoving. Then he said, "Supper's inside." That night he let them eat at his table. No speeches. No thanks. Just 4 bowls and a loaf of bread passed hand to hand. Clara tucked the children in and lingered on the porch. Luke sat on the steps, whittling a piece of cedar. "You work hard," he said. "So do you." He paused. "I ain't used to company. I ain't used to kindness." The wind blew soft through the grass. Somewhere, a barn owl hooted, and for the first time in years, Clara felt something stir beneath her ribs. Not safety, not yet, but maybe the beginning of it. It began with a drawing. Tomas, who rarely spoke unless spoken to, picked up a stub of charcoal one morning and sketched a picture in the dirt outside the barn. It was crude but clear, a stick figure of a tall man, a smaller figure with braids, and 3 tiny shapes in a line. Above them, a crooked heart. Beneath it, a sun. Luke found it. After returning from the south pasture, he stood staring for a long moment. Then quietly he stepped over it, careful not to smudge a line. That evening he brought home a small box of crayons from the general store. He didn't say why. The next day, the children began to fill the walls of the side room with color. Flowers, stars, a horse that looked suspiciously like Luke's mare, Jolene. It made the place feel less like a shed and more like something closer to a home. Clara caught herself smiling more. She sang as she cooked, even if soft. Her hands moved faster. The weight in her chest began to shift. One afternoon, Leo asked if he could help Luke with the fence. Luke looked at him for a moment, then handed over a pair of gloves twice the boy's size. "Don't lose a finger," he said, but there was no growl in his voice. Gabby followed Clara to the garden each day, planting green beans and counting worms. The wind itself seemed to change. Softer, warmer, but not everyone liked that. Miss Laverne, the town laundress, spotted Clara and the children at the Saturday market and whispered loud enough for all to hear, "Heard the cowboy took in a whore and her litter." Clara kept her head down. Luke didn't. He walked straight up to Miss Laverne, dropped a silver coin on her counter and said, "This is for your silence. Spend it wisely. Next time I won't be paying." Word spread and changed. By Monday, the town said Luke was keeping company with a strong girl who worked harder than any man. That week, a traveling minister passed through town. Clara stood at the edge of the crowd as he preached. She didn't join in the hymns, just listened. When he opened the floor, she stepped forward. "I ain't got much," she said, "but I've got 3 reasons to keep standing, and a man who gave us dirt and let us turn it into something green." The crowd went silent. Then someone clapped, then another, and just like that, something hard inside her cracked and fell away. That night, Luke sat beside her on the porch. "You spoke true," he said. Clara looked at the stars. "It felt good." He nodded. "They see you now." "I don't care if they do," she replied. "You do." He didn't answer, just tipped his hat, and inside the house the children laughed, the crayons scratched, and the wind carried a tune that had not been heard in years. The wind picked up early that morning, carrying with it the scent of mesquite and the promise of trouble. Luke rose before the sun, saddled Jolene and rode the fence line. Clara, already awake, watched from the window with a basin of laundry on her hip. He was gone longer than usual. When he returned, he was quiet, dismounted, hung his hat by the door. "Barbed wire's been cut," he said. Clara froze. "What does that mean?" "Means someone's testing the edge, trespassing." That night, Luke slept with his rifle propped beside the bed. The children sensed the tension. Gabi asked if wolves were coming. Tomas stayed close to the porch. Leo offered to help watch. Clara tried to keep their minds busy, gardening, baking, teaching letters with a piece of chalk and an old crate, but the air stayed heavy. One evening, Clara found Luke building a new fence post. She walked over and picked up the other end. Together they dug, hammered, and strung wire until the sun dipped low. They didn't speak much. When the last nail was in, Luke wiped his brow. "You work like you've always belonged here." Clara looked at the field. "Feels like I finally do." That night, they built a fire behind the house. The children roasted apples on sticks. Luke told a story about a lost calf that led him into a snake nest. Clara laughed, a real unguarded laugh. It startled even her. He stared for a second too long. Later, when the children were asleep, Clara lingered by the flames. Luke sat beside her. "There's something you ought to know." She looked up. "My wife, Celia, she died 5 winters ago. Fever took her fast. I buried her near the creek." Clara nodded. "I'm sorry. She wanted children. Never got the chance." Clara whispered. "They'd have been lucky to have her. She'd have liked you." The fire popped. Sparks lifted into the dark. Clara didn't say anything. She didn't need to. Luke pulled his coat tighter. "If I'm slow to say things, it ain't 'cause I don't feel 'em. I know," she said. "I see it in the way you fix what's broken." He nodded once, deeply. That night, Clara dreamed of fences, not as barriers, but as borders that marked where safety lived, where family began. And for the first time in her life, she dreamed of fire that didn't burn, but warmed. The first wheat crop came in dry but steady. The soil near the riverbed had soaked just enough rain to bless the earth, and Luke's hands, scarred, sun-dark, stubborn, moved with quiet precision as he cut rows under the heat of late summer. Clara joined him each morning before dawn. She carried water, gathered bundles, and calmed the children when they grew restless. The days were long, but there was pride in them, the kind that clung to sweat and the ache of effort. One afternoon, Luke handed her a scythe. "You want to learn?" Clara took it without hesitation. "Yes." He showed her the rhythm. Shoulders steady, arms loose, blades swinging like breath. She struggled at first, but didn't quit. By sundown, she'd cleared a row of golden stalks, and Luke stood beside her, nodding quietly. "Good," he said. "Real good." Tomas and Leo began carrying bushels in small shifts, grunting with pride. Gabby guarded the baskets and hummed old tunes she said her real mama used to sing. That night, the family gathered around a stew pot filled with carrots, onions, and scraps of salted beef. It wasn't much, but to Clara, it was everything. "I used to think work meant punishment," she told Luke, "but now it feels like something that's mine." He nodded. "You built this day." In town, word spread about the Granger harvest. Folks who had once whispered now tipped their hats. Even old Miss Laverne sent over a pie with no note. That was her way. The ranch grew louder, not with noise, but with life. Luke added a swing to the front porch. The children took turns spinning until they collapsed in giggles. Clara painted the side room walls a soft tan using leftover barn paint. Then came the letter, folded into thirds. No return address, just a mark on the seal, a crooked red M. Clara's face went pale. "My stepmother," she whispered. "She found us." Luke took the letter and read it in silence, then burned it in the stove. "She don't get to have you again," he said, "but what if she comes?" Luke reached for her hand. "Let her. She'll see this place ain't hers to claim." Clara didn't cry. She didn't speak. But she slept that night with Luke's coat over her and one hand resting on the Bible by the window. The next day, the harvest continued. They gathered corn, picked tomatoes, laughed under the sun. And for every bushel they carried, Clara repeated a single thought. "We built this, and no one takes it away." The morning started like any other. Clara was baking cornbread with Gabby clinging to her apron, and Thomas and Leo were chasing a chicken around the barn. Luke was sharpening tools in the shed when he heard the distant thunder of hooves. Not one, not many, just one horse, riding hard. He stepped outside and narrowed his eyes toward the ridge trail. A silhouette emerged from the heat shimmer, a rider in black with a wide hat and a cloud of dust in his wake. Clara stepped out with flour on her hands. "Luke, stay inside," he said. The rider pulled up near the fence and dismounted in one smooth motion. He didn't smile. He didn't introduce himself, just nodded toward Luke and said, "Looking for Clara." Luke didn't move. "She ain't looking to be found." The man reached into his coat. Luke's fingers twitched near his belt, but the man pulled out a folded sheet of paper. "She's legally bound. Transfer was never finalized. Her stepmother filed claim on her labor again." Clara stepped onto the porch, despite Luke's warning. "You're from her?" The man looked at her. "She says you're hers. And the children." "No," Clara said. "She lost that right the moment she sold us like animals. Don't matter what she lost. The law says different." Luke stepped forward. "You got 10 seconds to get off my land." The man met his eyes. "You want trouble?" Luke's voice was calm, deadly. "I want peace, and I've got the kind of silence men only earn by digging deep graves." The man hesitated, then swung back onto his horse. "Tell her," Luke said. "Tell her next time I won't talk first." The rider turned and vanished into the horizon. Clara's legs buckled. Luke caught her. "It's not over," she whispered. "No," he said, "but we're not alone now." That night, the children slept closer than usual. Luke sat on the porch with his rifle across his knees, and Clara watched the stars with a prayer in her chest. "Let us stay. Let us stay." The letter hadn't stopped Clara's stepmother. Days after the rider's visit, a fire was set on the edge of the west pasture. Luke and Thomas spotted it early and managed to put it out before it spread, but the message was clear. They weren't safe anymore. Luke doubled the patrols, reinforced the fence, He gave Leo a wooden whistle and told him to blow it if he saw strangers on the ridge. He told Clara nothing would happen to them, but she saw the wear in his eyes, the way he barely slept, the way he cleaned the rifle twice a day. That Sunday she walked to the old sycamore by the creek and knelt down beside a wooden cross where Celia Granger had been buried. "I know I don't belong here by blood," Clara whispered, "but I'll keep them safe like you would have. I swear it." She lit a small candle in a mason jar and left it beside the grave. That night, Luke found it and said nothing. He just stood beside her and nodded. The next morning, Clara gathered the children and began teaching them how to cook, clean, sew, and watch the land. "If anything happens," she said gently, "you keep each other close. You remember how to survive." They nodded, eyes wide. Meanwhile, Luke wrote a letter, then another, then rode into town to see the sheriff. He didn't trust the law, but he needed the record. When he came back, he handed Clara the marriage license application. Her heart nearly stopped. "You don't have to," he said, "but it puts you and the children under my name. Makes it harder for her to take you." Clara's hands trembled as she held the paper. "Do you want to?" "I want to keep you safe," he said, "and I wouldn't ask if I didn't mean it." She nodded. Then yes. They married under the same sycamore 3 days later. The minister came from the next town over. No guests, just vows whispered beneath the wind and 3 children clapping with sticky hands and hopeful hearts. Afterward, Luke gave Clara a silver ring that had once belonged to Celia. "She'd want it used," he said. Clara slid it on. "I'll earn it." "You already did." That night, Clara stood by the porch, the stars bright above. She no longer prayed to stay. She prayed to grow. The sky changed before anyone noticed the wind. One afternoon, while Clara was mending a saddle and the children chased frogs near the creek, the air turned still. Birds stopped singing. The world felt like it held its breath. Luke stepped onto the porch and scanned the horizon. Storms coming, but it wasn't just the weather. That night, a knock echoed through the valley. 3 men on horseback, lanterns swinging, stood at the gate. The one in front tipped his hat. "We're looking for Clara Monroe." Luke didn't budge. "She's not available. Her stepmother's filed a petition with the state. Says she's owed restitution." Clara appeared behind him, shoulders squared. "Restitution for what?" "Raising you, feeding your children." Clara laughed, bitter and short. "She starved us, sold us." The man shook his head. "Doesn't matter. She's coming with more men, more papers, and she's not coming to talk." Luke's jaw flexed. "Then we'll be ready." The men turned and rode into the dark. That night, Clara and Luke walked the fence one last time. "We can run," she said. He shook his head. "Running ends this story the wrong way." They reinforced the barn, moved supplies into the cellar, taught the children where to hide. It wasn't fear guiding them, it was defiance. Then came the lightning. It struck a tree on the far side of the field, setting dry grass ablaze. Luke and Clara worked until dawn to control the fire. Their hands blistered, their clothes were soaked. But the land held, and when the ash settled, Clara stood on the porch and looked to the smoking tree. "She tried to burn us out," she whispered. "But we're still here," Luke answered. The children, dusty and tired, stood behind them. Luke reached for Clara's hand, and for the first time she didn't hesitate. The fire was out, the fence stood, and for the first time in weeks, the horizon glowed gold instead of smoke grey. Clara rose early and walked the boundary alone. The earth was scarred but intact, and every step reminded her. This land had fought to keep her, or maybe she had fought to keep it. Luke was in the barn with Tomas, sanding down an old crate to turn it into a bookshelf for Gabby. Leo had asked for a garden of his own. Clara gave him 3 rows beside the well. That evening, she and Luke stood on the front porch. The wind was light, the chickens quiet. "I want to give this place a name," she said. He looked at her. "What name?" She thought for a moment. "Solace Ridge." He smiled. "It fits." A week later, Luke surprised her with a wooden sign, Solace Ridge. The letters were uneven but strong. Clara cried as she hung it by the gate. Life settled into new rhythms. Clara took up sewing again, selling aprons in town. The sheriff passed by one morning with good news. The petition filed by her stepmother had been denied. She was officially free. When she told Luke, he didn't say anything, just pulled her close and whispered, "I knew they couldn't take what's already home." The children celebrated with honey bread and milk. That night, under stars clearer than she'd ever seen, Clara sat with a notebook Luke had found for her. She opened it and began to write. "We are not the sum of what was done to us. We are what we choose to build when no one's watching. And this is ours." And she knew deep in her bones that no matter what came next, this story would never again begin with shame. It would begin with soil, sky, laughter, and the kind of love that takes root slowly. But forever spring came early to Solace Ridge. Wildflowers crept through fence posts. Bees returned to the old hives near the well. The land, once bruised and scorched, now pulsed with life. Clara woke before dawn most mornings. not from fear, but from peace. She found joy in bread rising under a tea towel, in Gabby's clumsy songs, in the laughter of Leo and Tomas echoing through the barn. Luke had begun building a new room onto the side of the house. A sewing room, he said, though everyone knew it would be her space. Clara helped him every evening, her hands growing calloused and skilled, her heart fuller by the day. One quiet afternoon, as they watched the children chase fireflies across the grass, Clara turned to Luke and said, "Do you ever think about what comes next?" He took a moment, then replied, "I used to think next didn't matter, that all I had was work and dust and quiet. But now I think next is you." She smiled. "That's what I think too." He leaned forward, pressing his forehead gently to hers, and then, in a whisper as warm as the evening breeze, he said it. "I love you." 3 words. No music, no grand gesture, but they hit Clara like thunder. She answered simply, "I love you too." They didn't need rings again, or prayers, or witnesses, just hands held tight, and the knowledge that what they had built, from ash, from bruises, from silence, was stronger than steel. That night, Clara wrote one last line in her notebook. "This story has no end, just roots," and that's how it stayed.